Okay, good afternoon and welcome, you amazing human beings. This is Dollars for Lunch. I am Dane van der Mast. It is Monday, the 13th of March. Guys, we have an amazing week ahead of us. If you were part of us and part with us, live with us last week, we traded a ton of events. It was NFP. NFP was madness, right? Directly after NFP, every time I opened up the markets and I saw those moves, I was just wondering how many of you were in those trades. After NFP itself, I stopped trading, right? I could just see the amount of volatility, the amount of confusion. I'd love to know from you, did anybody try and navigate that storm? It looked absolutely nuts. It still looks nuts. And there's a ton of other news that's coming to the market as well that is playing a massive ripple effect across the board. So we are going to be jumping into it this afternoon. There is daylight savings shift in the US, meaning the US market opens up slightly earlier. New York Stock Exchange opens up slightly earlier, all shifting back by 1 hour today. So meaning we are going to be trading a little bit earlier from this week, right? It means some of the fundamental events are going to be happening at 2:15 while the New York Stock Exchange opens. We are going to be going live from 3:15 to catch them at 3:30 every day this week. Now, again, this is a public broadcast, so it is free. It's a free edition show to let you know what is happening this week. So just quickly, as we have a look at some of our MVTs, I can see who was in there first. I think it is Marco Kukumur who was in there first and foremost as one of our MVTs. Warren was very first. Let's just see who of our MVTs are in the house. We have Shamim in the house, Cohen and Lana in terms of our Globex 360 live TV MVTs. Guys, let us know from where in the world you are joining us. We're going to break down the news and look at what's happening this week. We do have the CPI coming in on Tuesday. We have the PPI coming in on Wednesday. It is going to be big. It's going to be massive. We're going to prepare for that. Again, if you'd like to come trade these events live with us, get the advanced analysis, the setups prior to and trade live. It's simply a free asset to every single one of you that have Globex 360 live accounts. If you don't have a Globex 360 live account, what are you doing? Where are you? With whom are you trading? There's only one place to be, and that's right here, right now. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to open up the news, guys. There's a ton to discuss. Now, again, we have the New York Stock Exchange happening at 3:30 this afternoon in place of what we used to see at 4:30. Now, again, we are going to develop the strategy that we have been trading very successfully over the past 2 months, right? We're going to be looking at that New York Stock Exchange move. We're going to be looking at that potential reversal turnaround time, how we've been capitalizing on the markets. We're going to be looking at this afternoon, but again, because it's a public broadcast, I'm not going to be sharing with you that strategy. Tomorrow afternoon, right before we even get to that CPI data, I'm going to be having an advanced analysis session with Globex 360 account holders that have more than $1,000 in their accounts, meaning premium plus clients, but I'll also be revealing the strategy for the New York Stock Exchange reversal tomorrow afternoon. So again, you want to be definitely a part of that. And again, you just need to simply have a Globex 360 live account. Come in here, debate with us, look at analysis, share your opinion, so on and so forth. Remember, my Telegram link is down below. If you have an analysis you'd like to share and you'd like an opinion based on that, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, down below or in the comment section. We have an amazing team watching those comments to try and get back to you as fast as we can. I can see Rushua saying he is from the Kremlin. I apologize for you, my dear brother. We have Keithan from Northern Cape. Clarence is from Cape Town. We have Kazakhstan. Okay, beautiful stuff. We have Nigeria in the house. We have Pretoria in the house. Witbank in the house. Beautiful stuff. Do we have any other internationals? Would love to hear from you guys. Let's see, Josie in the house, Kaoting in the house, beautiful stuff. Okay, so guys, there's a ton to talk about. If there's anything specific that you would like to talk about, please drop it in the comments and I'm more than happy. We can open up, discuss, debate, whatever it may be. If it's about the markets, let's get it, let's go. So we're going to open up and we're going to be looking at what is happening in the world, but we're going to start on a local front. And again, you guys know the drill. We're going to be speaking about Eskom, right? MTN has just reported that they've had almost 700 million, right, affected on their books just due to load shedding. We were actually having this discussion as a business this morning. What is the true cost of load shedding, right? Again, they look at it from an income perspective, different companies that are able to report on it, but everyday people, everyday businesses that have meetings delayed, that have internet connections cut, how do you quantify that? How do you account for that, right? Again, the money that we're losing productivity wise as a country is just, I don't know how they calculate that, right? They say they know the numbers. I'd love to know, how do you quantify that? Again, so load shedding is going to continue to dominate local headlines. Again, there's a lot of fears about just where the South African rand is in relation to the rest of the world, so on and so forth. But load shedding is definitely going to remain a top concern for every single one of us right here in Southern Africa. Moving on into some of the international news, guys, this is a big one. It's going to have a massive effect on the rest of the markets. But in essence, for those of you who know, or for those of you who don't know, SVB, right, essentially is a major bank that, outside of the Lehman Brothers from, the housing crisis crash, has really been one of the second biggest bank collapses, right? Silicon Valley Bank essentially has basically been I don't know how else to say it. They're basically in the form of liquidation, right? Unable to honor their debt obligations. The US government has stepped in. But again, as we've seen with, the recent crypto collapses, the ripple effect in the industry is massive, right? So people are jumping to try and cover their positions, right? The American government has stepped in, saying they will honor those people who are trying to do withdrawals and depositors in general. But the ripple effect is huge. And as we've seen, right, when we talk about some of the previous collapses, more specifically being the FTX collapse, right, the fallout, the contagion from that is massive, right? We hear about the initial entity that ends up collapsing, but the fallout is much bigger than that. We are going to see subsidiaries collapse due to this, and just a very, very scary time when you start seeing major financial institutions of this level start to collapse. So we will be breaking the story down. There's a ton of data coming out in terms of why the collapse happened, and that is a very interesting read. I have linked the article down below if you'd like to jump into that a little bit further and just do a little bit more of your own research in terms of how that affects where we are in the markets this week. Now, again, this week is all inflationary. This is all inflationary data, right? The whole week is looking at what type of data we're going to get in terms of the CPI tomorrow and the producers price index happening on Wednesday. The whole world is going to be watching. Now, why is this important? It is super important for a couple of reasons. We're going to break them down, but let's quickly have a look at those fundamentals so I can show you a couple more of those reasons and why we should be paying a ton of attention to every single one of them. So we're going to have a look quickly at some of those fundamentals happening today as well as tomorrow. Now, again, as I showed you guys in the newsletter or in the publication in Telegram, there's no substantial news. Again, that's just the trend of being a Monday in general, right? But looking into Tuesday, and this is where the heat starts, is where we're going to start to get a bit of that substantial data. Now, again, remembering daylight savings time has shifted, so we are going to get that fundamental data a little bit earlier every day, starting from today. It is CPI, right? So again, Powell indicated last week in some of his testimonies that we covered live in Congress that there's a few key pieces of data that he is waiting for, right? NFP, which just happened, right, was a bit of a mixed bag. We saw unemployment tick slightly higher, right, moved into that 3.6% territory, but we saw some of the NF non-farm payrolls and private non-farm payrolls tick up as well. So unemployment went up, bad for the dollar, but the non-farm payrolls ticked up. The private non-farm payrolls ticked up higher. So that's why we had that mixed bag. But again, the unemployment data ticked in his favor. Now, again, the CPI, consumer inflationary data, as well as the producers inflationary data, that is going to be the last two big key sets of data that the Fed needs when they meet at the end of this month. Now, why is this important? This is important for the reason being that whatever the Fed does in terms of the next interest rates, that has got a ripple effect against the whole markets, right? We've seen the Fed has essentially come out swinging, hawkish in their opinion, saying they'll do whatever it takes to steer their ship towards the end direction, which is obviously bringing US inflation down. So market reactions to the CPI data tomorrow is going to be big. It's going to be massive. So let's have a look at some of the estimates in terms of where the market is currently positioning themselves. Core CPI, which is obviously consumer price inflation minus food and energy, which is the most volatile two components. They're expecting to remain flat. This again is month on month at 0.4%, whilst the normal CPI which includes food and energy, that is expected to decrease from last month down to that 0.4% number. Now, CPI year on year for Feb, right, which is going to be the next big ones, is the year on year change, right? CPI, including food and energy, is flat, expected at 6%, which is still a decrease from last month, while core is only expected to decrease by 0.1% to that 5.5 number. Now, if we see this, if we see these kind of numbers, right, if the forecasts are correct and we see those numbers or even less than, right, this will be negative the dollar. This will be what the stock market needs to rally. The stock market has taken absolute beating from this NFP. And again, that's just due to the high non-farm payroll numbers. So if inflation reads short or less than, right, what the markets are estimating, this means that the effects of these high interest rates that Powell has introduced and imposed on the US economy will actually pay off, and the stock market will take a massive breath and a sign of a less aggressive Fed towards the end of the month. The same can be said for the PPI, and we will prepare for those accordingly. We'll be doing it live an hour before the actual event. If you have $1,000 or more, and then again, if you have $100 in your live account, we will cover the actual event and be trading live. These will not be public sessions. It'll be for Globex 360 account holders. All right. Now, just as we wrap up the S&P 500 heat map prior to the US market going live, this was pretty much red across the board, as we can all pretty easily understand why, right? And that's just due to the chaos and the nature of the markets at the moment. So we're going to start off. New York Stock Exchange has already opened up. So we're going to move into our analysis side and then have a look if there's any opportunities from a live trading perspective. So we're going to take our time with this, again, because I'm developing the strategy based on the data I see today, as well as last year this time when we moved into daylight savings times. I'm going to compare the data and we're going to adapt our strategy accordingly to see if we still have the same advantage in the markets that we've had over the past 2 months. So I'd love to know from you guys quickly before we move on to this, how have you found, if you guys have been trading the New York Stock Exchange strategy with us, how have you found the strategy thus far in terms of the initial impulse, in terms of the reversal, the accuracy, and have you been using it? I would love to know from you guys in the comments. I'm looking at the comments. Vic is asking, any positions taken? Not as yet. Emergency meeting also held today regarding the banks. Exactly. Massive emergency meetings pretty much happening across the US and around the world. Remember, there are some international banks that also linked into the SPV situation, right? Beautiful stuff. Ritson saying 70% profitable with a strategy. That is massive. Anything above 60%, you are winning. Family, you are on the right path. Okay, so we're going to start off, we're going to open up our analysis and we're going to start off having a look at just some of the FX side, as we're going to start off with the dollar index, and then we'll open up and expand further into indices, which I'm sure is what everybody is waiting for this afternoon. So let's open up and let's give it a quick look. All right, so on the face of it, having a look at the dollar index, and again, this is just pretty much the aftermath of the NFP on Friday, right? So NFP, we were sitting here on the dollar index. NFP came out, initially reacted extremely negative to the dollar, was a bit of a build up, and then an absolute collapse on the dollar across the board. Now, in this particular situation on the dollar index, right, the fascinating story behind this, or the reason why this is, how do I say it? The reason why the correlation is absolutely broken. We actually had a few people commenting on Friday saying, hey, but if the dollar index moves here, this is what should happen. The very interesting correlation you're going to see here is that even though the dollar hemorrhaged across the board, and we're going to show you some examples now, the stock market and Wall Street have taken a beating too. Now, this shows you an absolute fear and panic in the market. Part of it is this SPV fallout. Part of it is, you know, the amount of big tech that are tied up into these banking issues. And again, most of the biggest companies situated within the Dow Jones, as well as the S&P 500, as well as the NASDAQ, are big tech. So the big question is how many of them are essentially tangled up into this SPV collapse, and what will be the aftermath? And I'm sure we are yet to see the full extent. Now, we're going to skip over some of the FX pairs this afternoon, and we're going to move straight into the US 30. And I want to show you guys something really quickly, just as we look at the dollar, the US 30 this afternoon really quickly. I just want to show you guys this point of view, because again, this is something we're going to be able to trade for quite a bit of time to come. Now, this is currently the US 30 on a weekly time frame, and I just want to bring to your attention, right, this last little bit over here the last bit of that red candle is obviously NFP for Friday, and this new candle is obviously the start of today. I just want to point out to you guys that from just a pure price action perspective, right, we were sitting in that bear market all throughout 2021, right, 2021 to 2022, the worst year in the stock market in quite a bit of time. We popped out of that market towards the end of 2022. We've made that retest right at the end of 2022, and then this little bit of a bull run until the last couple of weeks, right? We've really started to see prices hemorrhage there. I just want to point out that from a pure Fibonacci perspective, right, we stopped previously on the 38.2. Right, we haven't made a new price to that high, but we've pulled back past the 38.2 and we're sitting on that 50 fib. Now, why is that 50 fib so important? I just want to highlight the fact that we need to take in consideration there is a monster support just below our current position, right? Now, if we just take a step back and have a look at that, you can see from a pure price action perspective, there is reason to just be a little bit more cautious in this particular zone. Now, as we just drill down, I want to go down into an hourly time frame and we're going to map this out together, right? So just from a pure price action perspective, right, we're just looking at what opportunities may lie in this location, because again, today, great, Monday, but what we need to understand, Mondays are slow. We're looking at how will we be dealing with the markets tomorrow? How are the markets going to continue to deal with today? And how does today's New York Stock Exchange open affect the market, as well as a potential reversal as we potentially gear up looking at that CPI data release for tomorrow. So looking at, we have some very clear price action over where price currently is and what price is currently doing, and going back towards just having a look at the NFP data, or where we were on an NFP perspective. This is currently a 30-minute time frame. It doesn't tell the full story here, but ultimately we had a massive whipsaw. Prices fell slightly, pushed back up, fell substantially, right? At some point here, fell 6,000-7,000 pips, retraced, thinned out, and this was pretty much the thinning out happened early hours this morning, and then that massive collapse happening pretty much just after the London session this morning. Right now, where we're currently sitting is the interesting part. Now, if I just break this even further down into the 1 minute time frame, let's have a look here. If we're seeing a little bit of a directional push from the New York Stock Exchange level, you can see how we're resisting that 50 fib, right? The 50 fib that we pressed through, we measured a little bit earlier, we're currently sitting in that 50 fib range as a resistance. The next important thing to note about this range and where we're currently sitting is, do we have any sort of diagonal resistance that's hampering price at this level? Let's just check it out. I don't see anything substantial, but I also do just want to take into account the fact that this little spike through here may have just been a fake out, and that may be the true resistance level. I'm going to zoom in here really quickly. Yeah, and I'm pretty happy with that from just a pure trend line perspective. I just want to say that is drawn as background object. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so for the New York Stock Exchange, let's look at the quick impulse here to see if the markets are revealing their hand. And the initial impulse is topside. I just want to point that out. Okay, so the New York Stock Exchange, if they were hiding any orders, is definitely topside. But if we have a look here, from a divergence perspective, we aren't getting any serious divergence, right? RSI is making those lower lows and price was making lower lows. So that all looks fine. There's no deep concerns for any sort of reversal here. We made a higher low, which we also then matched on the pure price action side of things. So there's no weird divergence here that's telling us, price has to shift, we need some sort of reversal, price has to break higher. And this will then just purely come down to price action. Remember, this is going to be the first afternoon the New York Stock Exchange opens slightly earlier. So the rest of the markets, whether it be London, whether it be Asian markets, whether it be Sydney, these markets are all going to have to adapt their trading volumes into the New York Stock Exchange, right? Not every place in the world observes daylight savings, right? South Africa doesn't, and Asian markets don't either, right? So they will need to obviously adapt to deal with that as well. So for the New York Stock Exchange, it definitely seems like we're getting some bullish momentum. Definitely seems like markets do want to push bullishly, but I would like to break through this area of resistance this afternoon more clearly and specifically. Right, if we just look at this trend in terms of these rising highs, I would like to break this current position. Should we pop through this level, I would consider chasing the New York Stock Exchange from just a pure volume perspective to the top side. We've had that little bit of a pop there. And again, what we're going to be monitoring this afternoon is, do we start to see that reversal that comes in 30 minutes after the fact, right? Now, again, the conditions for that reversal, how we look for that, is there any indicators that can assist? I'll be breaking that down in full tomorrow once we've looked at what happens today, and is today's opening is there some similarities between the DST summer shift from last year this time? That's what I'll be comparing this afternoon and presenting to you guys tomorrow prior to our actual CPI data release. So again, volumes look pretty low. We only have here about 171 pips to the north side as a push. Now, for a New York Stock Exchange, that is fundamentally low. Let's quickly give a look into NAS in terms of where NAS is currently sitting. I'm also quite interested in what we see develop here from that perspective. Let's have a look here. Okay, now NASDAQ is in slightly worse territory, and that's just purely based on this whole SBV issue, right? It is big tech. NASDAQ represents some of the biggest technologically publicly traded firms within the exchange. So NAS will be affected slightly differently to the actual SBV issue, or actually to the US 30 items. So I think for me, what I'll be really eyeing out this afternoon is, do we see a break after New York Stock Exchange of NAS below the previous low we saw? Let's see here at 1449. This is a 1 minute time frame, and should we see that break below that level, it may be worthwhile considering some sort of short option over there. I just want to also point out, from just a pure price action perspective, on the NASDAQ, looking at the start of February to where we are now, there's certainly a bit of a channel here, and we do need to just be cautious of any sort of support / resistance right there in that area, which is just south of our current position. So even though, you know, breaking below previous low, you know, one might argue and say, well, listen, look at the world, it's a mess, a bank has gone under. That bank primarily, I wouldn't say specialized, but had a ton of tech in its portfolio, right? From a fundamental and even sentimental perspective, you would say, okay, NASDAQ is going to bleed. Even if that is the approach, or that's the thinking, we just have to ask ourselves, well, how much can the NASDAQ actually bleed? Because from an hourly time frame perspective, you know, between where we are now and our actual support area, we're looking at about, let's see here, not even 1,000 pips south of our current position. So is it worth trading? I don't know. It's up to you. I would love to hear from you. Okay, so someone is saying gold is on fire. We're going to give it a look. Let's have a look here. Confidence in dollar and stock has been broken. Tinas, I agree with you. Things are pretty much broken on the dollar side. Again, and I think it was Ben Capital was speaking about, let's see. Ben Capital was actually speaking about on the Friday trade about gold is, you know, giving a buy signal. The dollar index was at a sell signal, at a buy signal. The reality is, even if it was, the correlation between the dollar and the stock market have been broken with the amount of fundamental data and just the general politics of where we're currently sitting. So before, where we could rely to a good extent, at least to be an indicator of where the dollar is heading from an index perspective, we can't use it at this stage in time. So we're going to have to wait and see whether we get that index or that correlation coming back in line. Just quickly having a look at German 30 because it's responded extremely well in being a little bit of a precursor for us in looking at the markets. German 30 still heading lower, right? Let's have a look here. Even after the 2 o'clock US market open, German 30 has certainly got a ton of momentum and heading straight towards the downside. German 30 already looks to be below. Let's have a look there. Right, already looks to be below the session low of 11 o'clock this morning. So that's very interesting to see. Yeah, let's continue giving it a look. NAS looks like it wants to break that previous low. Let's give it a quick look again. Now it's looking like it wants to break that previous low, and it definitely seems like US 30 is struggling to punch through that zone, which is, again, for me to buy this out, I would need to see some sort of confidence on the NASDAQ and some sort of confidence on German 30, which we're just not seeming to get. And I've got a suspicion this afternoon that we are going to see some further lows as market volumes come in, right? Now, again, when we've seen something trend for a substantial amount of time, this is something I've observed on indexes, is when we've seen them trend extremely aggressively prior to the New York Stock Exchange, and the New York Stock Exchange doesn't bite back quite aggressively, it means there aren't a ton of buy orders waiting or icebergs for the New York Stock Exchange main trading session to go live. Because again, if something's trended historically or just trended very aggressively to the low side, big money will look at that as a cheap buy, right? And we'll start lining up those buy orders as price ticks lower. Because remember, big banks, big liquidity positions are not placed in one go. They're placing orders and staggering orders so they get filled at the right prices. The lower price moves. So the lower price moves, especially in after hours trading, right, that would then activate all of these bigger orders. So you don't see an initial impulse to the top side. It tells you that there's something wrong there, right? There's an imbalance. There's not as many buyers as there potentially should be, and it could be a little bit of a sign of weakness towards the top side. Just something to consider. Again, everything today is going to be new due to the daylight saving shift and just general markets. There's going to be a lot of traders getting into the markets this afternoon at 4:15 and wondering, why the New York Stock Exchange isn't moving the way that they wanted to. And it's just the reality of things, right? So we're going to continue watching that. Someone was mentioning gold, that gold is flying. Gold is absolutely dominating on that dollar weakness, right? Having a look at gold, absolutely crushing it on that dollar weakness. Now, we spoke about this again as part of the NFP itself. Let's have a look here. Okay, so here was NFP. Let's go down maybe to an hour time frame. It might. Oh, I just dragged all of my levels. I think my levels were there. Unlock those levels. Let's go back into our actual NFP time, because this is where it started to become something that was potentially tradable and something of potential value, right? So NFP started and gold just started just absolutely hammering through the roof. Gold reacted true, right? Whilst the rest of the stock market kind of was stuck with a bunch of volatility, stuck trying to figure out and interpret the data, right? Gold was very clear that the dollar is weak, right? And again, we should have potentially focused more on gold, but again, there was no foresight that, stock markets would be broken and that commodities would rally. So again, when all else fails, commodities are your friend, right? There's a reason that gold is treated as safe haven currency. Is the second the rest of the market goes out of balance, the rest of the world runs to gold. The rest of the world runs to something solid, something tangible, something that has intrinsic value, right, in terms of actual commodities. So gold acted absolutely true to its nature, and gold has continued to dominate towards the top side. The big question, right, and the big opportunity lays ahead of the fact of what we get tomorrow in terms of that inflationary data, right? Because everything that's happening now is fear-based, right? All the data we're seeing is fear-based. And essentially, the big thing now is if we see those inflationary data terms start to tick down, the market needs some sort of positivity, right? The market needs some sort of indication that the last couple months worth of pain through the Federal Reserve coming in, hammering the market, the talks of recession, of a soft landing, hard landing, whatever the case may be, the market is looking for some signs of positivity, some sign that they're ticking in the right direction. Now, that unemployment data ticking from 3.4% to the 3.6%, that's a really good start. But if we start to see that specifically the consumer inflation data tomorrow, CPI, tick down below estimates, right, this will give the stock markets as a whole a massive reason to shout out. Now, the reason even more so outside of the sentiment is have a look at where the dollar is, have a look at where USD is, and you explain this to me. Think about this really quickly, right? Let's have a look at where the dollar is. So this is the dollar index, right? This isn't gold. I know gold's super keen to be here with us. Have a look at the dollar index, right? Absolutely getting pummeled, 30-minute time frame, right? Have a look at USD. USD busy breaking to the top side right now. Let's just go back to the 30 minutes. Let's go back to the USD. Absolutely getting pummeled, right? Now, if the dollar is getting trashed and US30 is getting trashed, right? the sync and the correlation is completely broken. What is the US 30? What is the stock market looking for to start rallying? They're looking for confirmation and absolute certainty that the data that's coming through in terms of inflation is actually in line with what is happening in the world and in the market. So if CPI ticks down tomorrow, we could see a huge recovery on the Wall Street, right, as a whole, whether it's US 30, NASDAQ, S&P 500. The only, I would say, unknown is going to be this SBV fallout. If there's connected to any of the big banks, again, what the US is doing. From my perspective, what I'm reading, it looks like the US economy, or at least the US federal government, is stepping in a massive way, learning what happened in the 2007-2008 housing crisis with Lehman Brothers, so on and so forth. They're learning in a very big way what to do and how to step in and how to help, right? There was a lot of comments that, Federal Reserve will not bail out, the executives of the bank, and they honored that, right? They said, listen, they're going to look after client funds and client money, but they're not going to be bailing out the bank and the shareholders and looking after them and all the rest of that. So they've been true to that, and they're holding out according to their word. Now, US City is absolutely making a bomber here towards top side, and I can't help but just be cautious here and just get in, just have a look at where we're going to go here. But ultimately, seeing a nice big push towards the top side. Now, is that push towards the top side markets are essentially turning around and say, hey, there needs to be a recovery? Are we seeing some delayed volumes from the New York Stock Exchange? I don't know, right? This is the first day the New York Stock Exchange opens up late, opens up earlier than expected. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can continue some of these gains. Again, I said I would like to see a change from NASDAQ. We're getting that. German 30, we're getting that too. So there's something big happening in the markets, and it could be cause for celebration in terms of a potential reversal. But as with everything, we need to allow this to come full circle and allow the data to obviously tick in. The only thing I'm concerned about here is the 45 exponential moving average. We need to obviously clear that level to have a concise move through the top side. In addition to that, we are at that current resistance level. So I'm going to be very cautious here, open up a very, very small trade, a feeler position, because again, I would like to see specifically this afternoon, do we get that reversal, right? And if we don't get that reversal, do we get a continuation in volume based on this New York Stock Exchange move? So that's going to be very interesting for me this afternoon to obviously watch and monitor. Before this afternoon, we're only at about 250, 260 pips in terms of a very, very, very small move, right? This may have been a valuable lesson in pending orders. This may have been a good opportunity to catch a pending order for a potential breakout. And I think specifically in this season, right, because it's not fundamental data and anything can happen, I think one of the best tips and tricks I can potentially impart, and again, this is not financial advice, this is education, entertainment purposes only. This traders getting together, discussing trading things, right? One of the best tricks, hacks, whatever I can tell you about is that in this season, in silly season, which is what we're in, right? Banks are freaking out. Inflation is on the headlines. We've got still the Russia-Ukraine issue looming. We've got, China, which is always on the other side doing their thing. While this is happening, right, what we need to do is consider very seriously pending orders that for very serious breakout points, right? That is going to be the most important thing. Tinus Van Zyl won't risk a trade on this setup. Stop loss for US 30 is very small, guys. We're utilizing a very, very small trade here. I'm not trading this NYSE breakout effectively as a breakout, right? Again, we're just trading some volume here and we're just looking at any sort of reversal here. If you don't want to trade this afternoon's New York Stock Exchange, I would honestly advise don't, right? Again, tomorrow we're going to break down the strategy. We're going to break down the breakout points. We're going to break down the reversals. I'm just putting in a feeler trade. If this one wants to go to the moon, then so be it, right? Very, very simple. In terms of stop loss, your stop loss needs to be based on the trade of the account size you're taking. I've taken literally the smallest possible trade that you can take on an account, right? Usually I trade 50 lots, 100 lots. I've traded less than a standard lot, right? So again, feeler trade, my total risk is $11 on this position. So it's a feeler trade, nothing big, nothing to write home about. So if you don't want to trade this, no problem whatsoever. But all I'm saying is that in the season, the one thing you do definitely want to be paying a bit of attention to is pending orders, right? So when you've got some good price action, anything can happen, right? Markets can announce X, there can be this bank foreclosure, Y, Z. That would be the time to capitalize on a pending order, because every time I've looked at the markets since NFP, we've broken levels, and we've broken levels is substantial, right? Fabian, speaking about Bitcoin, I don't know how many of you guys actually looked at Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is having the time of its life, or at least the last time I had a look, right? So I was looking at Bitcoin a little bit earlier. Have a look at Bitcoin, right? Totally benefiting from this absolute craziness and indecision in the markets right now. What's exciting about this pure price action from where Bitcoin is sitting is where it is right now at this moment in time, right? Is this the comeback story for Bitcoin? Honestly speaking, I don't know. And you know what? It's at a very precarious time, because the reality is the whole issue with SBV and FTX hasn't even been resolved. And Bitcoin right now is breaching that 22,500 mark. This is not necessarily a complete reversal, but it's something definitely welcoming to see, considering how much trouble Bitcoin has been in. Now, I just want to also point out there's a substantial zone that Bitcoin needs to remain above, and this is currently looking at a 1 hour time frame, and Bitcoin needs to remain above this zone to remain valid, right? So again, don't buy something in this current state or point of view. Again, unless you already encountered or anticipated the breakout here, ultimately allow Bitcoin to settle, and if it settles and holds out above this 22,300 mark, 22,200 mark, may be very, very considerable as a potential trade. But Bitcoin is loving, this instability, because again, that's why it was produced, right? Blockchain technology was made because of the issues with the normal banking system, right? The fact that, there's all these issues. We look at this Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, case in point, right? Bankers just doing rubbish things with people's money. I'm not saying that it cannot happen with crypto, but its whole premise is that it's supposed to be decentralized. Not any one person can bring down the network or manipulate, whatever the case may be. Is USDC still depegged? Fabian, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Not sure whatsoever. Crypto is still the future? Absolutely. So I've said this a few times. I still believe that crypto is our future. But when that future will become a reality, I don't know. And whether Bitcoin or any one particular coin will become that specific intrinsic value type item, I don't know, right? And I think we're still quite a while away from depending solely on any one crypto, right? As a whole, they need to prove that they can hold value and just remove some of the volatility, because the volatility is what chases away wanting to hold and keep any of these small things. So on the USDT, a nice little push there, but honestly, we need to make some serious pushes through here. So I'm not going to essentially hold this for a ton of time, because if we're going to get a reversal, we'll get a reversal in this stage. So I'm going to pretty much move my stop loss as close to entry as humanly possible. Let's see, does US30 pop through this resistance level now in the next little bit, right? I think if we pop through, it'll be very, very interesting. If we can hit a pop of, let's say, 500 pips through this level, it'll be very, very interesting what happens in terms of that reversal that is coming out in the next couple, let's see, 2 minutes and 5 seconds from now. That'll be very interesting. Do we start to get a massive decline in volume? Do we get that reversal? Very, very interesting times. I'm super excited. Again, as per our strategy for the last 2 months, it's been extremely profitable. When it works extremely well, and just something I'm really looking forward to further adapting and just fine-tuning and tweaking for every single one of us and our clients. So let's have a look here. Let's see, a nice little push, still not really clearing these levels. It's starting to run into a little bit of headwind here. It'd be interesting to see if we can just hit the 500 pip mark here in terms of this level. Look, it's a super late entry. If we were paying attention to this as per our normal strategy, this would be 2,000 pips right now. But a nice quick little level there. And I believe we've just smashed, yeah, I think we hit our 500 pips there. So we'll bring our trump there, and I'm pretty much just going to move my stop loss to break even now, just as we cover our position in case of any sort of reversal. So nice little smack there, 500 pips, nothing to write home or to granny about, but yeah, pretty simple trading stuff. So there we go. I'm leave that position there. I'm again not looking to essentially ride this one as a massive position. It's the start of the ST. We're testing, we're in the markets, it is live. We need to make sure that our strategy will be replicated even with the change in time zone, right? Because that can throw everything off. All the players become different, the timings become different. That's something we just want to monitor and make sure. Right, let's have a look. Nasdaq also fending itself quite well. German 30 fending quite well, but quite positive to see at overall we're seeing some of those moves there. Whilst the dollar's not taking an absolute spanking, it's pretty much neutral at this point. So again, this tells me, because the dollar is neutral and we're seeing all this movement currently on Wall Street, on the stock market, that this is definitely stock market isolated. This has got nothing to do with the dollar. This has got nothing to do with any other factor outside of fear of the markets and where the markets are currently at, where the market's currently sitting. So again, if we consider that the sell-off then was a delinked from the dollar and the sell-off was purely fear-based, then we can also surmise and understand then that what we're going to see in terms of tomorrow's CPI data, that will be purely based on perception, what the market believes to be true. If we see a reduction in inflation, how will the market react to that, right? And I do have a bit of a opinion based on that, and again, that's my personal opinion. I'm going to share that tomorrow in terms of what I think is going to happen, my particular setup, and then again, once, as always, we are going to be trading that live tomorrow. So markets are situated perfectly. It's now about seeing, do we see the results? Are we able to capitalize based on that? Now, I'm going to be placing a little bit of a feeler trade again this afternoon, and I'm looking at potentially reversing this momentum that we've seen this afternoon, right? So I'm placing in again a slightly smaller feeler trade, again, because the potential reversal time frame can happen anywhere from 1 to 15 minutes at the what used to be the 5 o'clock mark, now potentially going to be the 4 o'clock mark, and also it can also still be at 5 o'clock. And again, that's why I'll break it down tomorrow very specifically, is today is going to be a testing phase to see what do we end up seeing there, right? So again, I'm looking at a potential reversal of this area. Let's have a look if we have any decent market structure. So again, to be confirmed, we need to not only break that resistance level, but then even break further down than that. And I'd like to see whether we see that materialize in the next couple minutes from a sell side perspective. So look at the US 30, looking like she wants to do a little bit of retracement. Nasdaq making a little bit of an effort to show us ahead of what it wants to do, but again, we'd like to see a nice substantial break there. No, I was thinking we might have some price action here, but I think it's just a parallel channel. I don't think it's anything worth worrying about. Dollar just coming off of those lows and obviously backing up on gold as well. USD ZAR, very interesting. I wanted to talk about this quite seriously today as well, is just looking at where USD ZAR is. USD ZAR is sitting in a really precarious position, right? If we have a look at the story of USD ZAR, so remember we were speaking about last week selling USD ZAR in this zone. Why we were speaking about selling USD ZAR? Because the exact same thing has happened in the past. We've projected all the way up into these highs, broken, retested, and then pretty much moved quite a bit to the downside. Now, USD ZAR didn't make it that easy for us, right, in terms of an absolute just one touch and go, but ultimately hung around in this area for I think 2 or 3 days, if I'm not mistaken, right? Pretty much all the way from Wednesday to Friday, and the day of Friday, I mean, it started collapsing before we even got the data. But ultimately, where we're currently sitting is quite important because of the fact that we've pretty much come down to support, and again, any sort of CPI data will essentially put USD ZAR at a key pivot point right here. So again, weaker than expected inflation data is going to be bad for the dollar. Essentially could force USD ZAR to break current support, which is currently sitting at that $18.12 to $1. Again, that's if CPI numbers come below forecast or below expectation. If they come in higher than, it's going to boost the dollar. We know USD ZAR will buy off of that support, depending where it is this time tomorrow, right? So USD ZAR, definitely an interesting one to pay attention to. And again, we are running that USD ZAR trading competition. So if you'd like to win your share of that 40,000 Rand, again, it's just a trading volume that we are going to be looking at in terms of that actual giveaway. Outside of that, guys, we're going to do a quick intermission as we change batteries. So this is going to be a super quick one. We're going to try and have it wrapped up within, I think, about 30 seconds. So let's quickly do it. 30 seconds, get some coffee, and I'll see you guys in a second. And you can see me right now, meaning this team is absolutely amazing. Quickest battery change I've ever seen in my life. That was some Ferrari, actually not Ferrari, that was some Red Bull F1 racing pit stop kind of thing. Well done. Okay, beautiful. So just having a look at that potential turnaround for 4 o'clock. We're definitely not seeing it materialize right now on US 30. So meaning there's a very big suspicion that I have that we could go back to a potential strategy that we saw late, or I'd say the middle of last year, which I will be speaking about tomorrow. But if it is the case, it involves some very interesting trading. It involves some longer trades for us to essentially capitalize on, right? Meaning it puts us in a position that we're able to look at the New York Stock Exchange spike, hold plus minus about an hour and a half, and then potentially look at a reversal once we pass break even or made a decent amount of money. So if that is the case, that's going to be super exciting. But again, we will be breaking that down in full details tomorrow. Let's just put an alert here. I just want to make sure we don't miss it. And I primarily was quite interested, do we see any sort of movement at that 4 o'clock mark? Brent is a little bit of a mess. I don't want to get into that this afternoon. I just want to scan through the rest of the markets. Euro USD holding fairly steadily. This is a 4-hour time frame. Not all too much happening on the euro dollar phase or euro dollar front of things. But again, the big discussion this afternoon is going to be one of two things, right? It's going to be essentially this Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, any potential new fallout or contagion with them and other linked banks, right? That's going to cause a lot of pressure on this sector. But more than that, all eyes are going to be on that inflationary data tomorrow. Consumer inflation data is going to be massive, right? That is where the world's eyes are going to focus. You can best believe the Federal Reserve has a focus there too. The volume for that is going to be massive, right? Again, we get the producers' inflation data the day afterwards, but once we see what's happened on the consumer side, we generally know what to expect on the producer side, right? Because again, when we see inflationary data trickle into the consumer side, we know that in most cases, right, that markup or that, you know, paying more for the same thing, right, essentially came in at a production level, right? Increased movement costs, increased logistics costs, supply costs, raw material costs are at the producing level, and that's where the knock-on effect happens to the end person or the client at the end of the day. So let's have a look here. Beautiful stuff. Okay, so we are getting that reversal just a little bit later than what we, it's not necessarily a reversal. Our alert went off. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong chart there. I thought we were getting our reversal already, but we just got a nice little spike down back to a supply zone. And US 30 looks extremely happy towards that top side. So again, New York Stock Exchange breakout may still definitely have a very big role to play in our trading strategies for the next quarter at least the next 3 months. So I'm super excited about this, guys. I want to end this session and I want to start jumping into my back testing and past data. So tomorrow we're well prepared for two things, right? A, the CPI, B, our new strategy for the next quarter, right? Looking at DST shifts, right? If you're in that buy and you're holding that buy, then you could certainly be smiling because it is absolutely rocketing, right? It's now at about 1,700, 1,800 pips towards the top side. Okay, beautiful stuff, guys. Outside of that, listen, there's not too much all to speak about. Again, those are the politics, those are the news. Again, today's very interesting. I love when we get to DST shifts, because it's just a bunch of data we need to get through, a bunch of new strategies we need to test and adopt. It is going to be big. It is going to be massive. So stick around for that. Again, if you're a Globex 360 account holder, we will be trading the CPI live tomorrow. If you have more than $1,000 in your live account, we will be doing the advanced setup beforehand. And this is where I'll be teaching the New York Stock Exchange open as well as reversal strategy, as well as breaking down the CPI, past CPIs, where we are now, and the probability of what could end up happening, as well as just a general setup. We may be trading it beforehand, depending how markets move. Again, you guys know I like to be in a profitable position before the actual event happens, so that in the event, it's in line with our position and our thinking, that we're able to just straight profit. In the event it goes opposite to us, we're able to close out a position in profit and then manually enter into the market in the opposite direction, should that end up happening. So again, that's all that we're going to be doing tomorrow. Outside of that, guys, listen, the comments and the chats, you guys have been absolutely amazing. To our MVTs that have stuck around with us, and much love to every single one of you. If you've traded through NFP Friday and some of these crazy moves over the course of Friday evening as well as this morning, then just massive big ups to every single one of you guys. Again, we have the USD trading competition that will be wrapping up the end of this month. So again, if you'd like to win your share of that 40,000 funded accounts, all you need to do is trade USD, and some of those leading volumes will qualify for the win at the end of the month. Outside of that, guys, it's been a very, very long Monday, been very, very busy on our sides. But again, it's going to be worth it as we look at new strategies, new opportunities for this next quarter of 2023. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you for your time. If we've earned it, smash the like button, so consider subscribing, or even join below to become a member. If you're not in the Telegram group already, link is down below. Outside that, guys, have yourselves an amazing afternoon. And until I see you guys a little bit later, you know the drill. Remember to live, learn, and trade the Globex 360 way. And until I see you a little bit later, goodbye.